For Dawnbreaker on a 20, this is what I played. If you're not doing it on a 20, I would run the normal build with Legacy, but my main concern in here was healing the first boss Heal Absorb. My mastery is a little bit high right now, and I have some mastery gems in. This is mostly just because I've been playing Windwalker, and I don't really feel like putting them back.
1.
We do have a mage, but we talked about it beforehand. He ended up not taking Decurse because I have Tiger's Lust and Chi-Chi that can get rid of one on myself and one on someone else, as well as everyone else being a dwarf. So we decided that it would be better for him to have a better Ice Cold, I believe, is the trade-off for mage. On the first pull, I usually just use Chi-Chi right away because you're going to be heading into a Tormenting Ray right away, as well as a Decurse application, some tank damage, and any kicks that may be getting off on the Gather. And there's also the Stygian Seed, which does quite a bit of application damage, but we do have just the regular healer dispel for that one, so you just want to make sure that people are topped when that goes out. Also, do not diffuse the debuff because it will do friendly fire. It is very likely that it won't do damage to the mobs, but it will do damage to your group if they're in it. We get a little unlucky here because the debuff goes on Prue and he does not have AMS or Dwarf and I don't have Tiger's Lust. But we just heal through it because he's a Death Knight and they kind of live for free. And then when this one goes out on Fiend, I can just Tiger's Lust it right away. This is pretty much the only place we were worried about getting all of the decurses without him actually being talented into decurse, but it ended up working out. Garo disengaged his debuff, so I still have Tigers left when we get another one. This pull is pretty similar to the first one, except there is a commander and we are lusting, but again, I usually just pop Chi-Chi right away. And with the commanders, I do tend to focus my tank a little bit more, just because they are going to be getting that bleed when they don't dwarf it off. But it's a pretty similar pull all in all. We do have one of the fake Curse Blades run in at the end. I don't really know what caused it. It might have just been AoE or some type of ground effect that migrated during the boat movement, but because it's Dawnbreaker, we can just mount up and fly away. Pretty much the only thing we have to pay attention to on the boat is the bleed on the tank and then the cocoon on any of the DPS or yourself. This is mostly 2-target healing, and the damage on the DPS is going to be a lot harder than the damage on your tank, so I would recommend, if you're using Life Cocoon at all, to hold it for a DPS. If the web mage ends up getting a cocoon off and then dies, it will do the ticking damage, but it won't explode at the end, so you don't have to worry about sending externals. You can just heal them with Soothing Mist. This boat is very similar. You don't have to press GG here, but I just kind of felt like it to make the spot healing a bit easier. We are letting the web bolts on the web mage go because they're only on the tank, and then we are kicking the shadow mage. For this boss, you are ramping every single burning shadows, basically. There are safe burning shadows and there are dangerous burning shadows. The safe ones are where it is just the heal absorb that you have to heal off, and the dangerous ones are where it is paired very closely with the obsidian beam. In either case, you don't have a ton of time to heal this off, but there are some that are much more dangerous than others, and we call those overlaps. And we are calling it in Discord on which ones are more dangerous or which ones I don't have buttons for. I did revival this one mainly because I was not expecting the absorb to be as large as it was, because I hadn't done this on a 19 yet. We had 2-chested my key and just went straight into the 20. Normally I would hold that just in case we have a bad push where we get the burning shadows and then immediately go into intermission, and I would still recommend doing that. Most of my healing here is just coming from Ancient Teachings as well as Harmonic Surge through all of the various amps that we have. Obviously, these sets where you have Chi-Ji are going to feel a lot better than the ones that you don't, but you should still be ramping pretty much every single one. For this one, I used my Thunder Focus Tea, which triggered my Aspect of Harmony spend, which, looking at the health bars, it was probably a little overkill, but we were also headed into intermission, so I wasn't punished for it in this case. But if we were to get another one here before pushing, I don't have Revival, and I don't have tea, and I wouldn't have it in that situation. So I did get lucky here, kind of, but just a heads up, don't overcommit cooldowns.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The first set of Burning Shadows right after you land is going to be very difficult because you go from Collapsing Night into Burning Shadows into Beam, and all of your hots and everything have worn off from the flight. So for this one I do use my Intellect Pot. This is usually one that we'll send defensives on. Once again, we have Chi-Ji for this one. I will Dispel, I have all my hots on everyone, and I spend my pre-stacked Blackout, and then I'm just DPSing and healing through Harmonic Surge and my Ancient Teachings transfer. You can send Vivifies here and there if there's someone that is out of range of your healing or is particularly low for whatever reason, but generally you're going to be DPSing through the whole thing outside of your ramping. Using Aspect of Harmony to heal these off is actually extremely helpful. I think people tend to underestimate Aspect of Harmony and the HPS that it can provide. A lot of people fall into the hole of thinking it's just for damage, but in high keys a lot of the time it is used actually primarily for healing. This one I got a little lax on because I kind of expected the boss to die, but if I really needed to at this point, I could have sent Chi-Ji and just not had it for the next pull, but we sent Barrier and I just healed through it normally. In retrospect, I probably would have rather have sent Chi-Ji here and then saved Barrier for the next pull. Mainly because Chi-Ji is a 1-minute cooldown and I have other things that I can use to keep the group alive on this pull, and Barrier is a 3-minute that I would have rather have had for the debuff application on someone that would get unlucky. Lots of tank damage on this pull and on the next, so I am watching him quite a bit. I am frequently reapplying my enveloping mist and making sure that he is who I am primarily healing, along with the Abyssal Blast targets. Something to keep in mind here is that Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep are both really good tools to help your tank drop their necrotic debuff. This is applied from the melee attacks from, I believe, the Shadow Walkers are applying it. If you're only using Ring of Peace or you only have Ring of Peace, you need to make sure that someone else is also ready for the ROP because you need to be stunning them. If they charge directly back in, most of the time they're just going to reapply, but if they are knocked away and then stunned, you can usually get a drop on the debuff. This is another pull where there is a lot of tank damage, and frankly there's a lot of damage in general with all of these debuffs going out, but in addition you have the tank with the necrotic stacks that he's gaining throughout the pull. It's kind of hard to drop, kind of hard to be in melee. There's a lot going on in this pull, and I hadn't done this one before, so I mismanaged my cooldowns a little bit. I should have been paying better attention to my Jade Empowerment stacks and held on to them longer. And I am chasing the pack a little bit. He was going pretty far to try to drop stacks, and ultimately that's more important than my positioning, so that was fine and I could adjust, but I do feel a little bit out of place at the moment. I lose my Jadefire Stomp, but I have it in 2 seconds, but I'm just kind of vivifying and trying to get back into melee consistently with all these Black Hails going on. Watching this back, I also should have been using my Renewing Mist stacks instead of vivifying people to try to keep them up, just so that I could get that application of Chi Harmony instead of just trying to keep my head above water. Now that I have Chi Ji and we have drop stacks again, we've stabilized a little bit as we're getting towards the end of the pull. And this is our last pull. My main focus here was getting our stops as well as babysitting the people that have Abyssal Blast, especially if it's going into a Dark Orb. They have to use a defensive on pretty much any key level if they have both. This Dark Orb nearly one-shots me with no defensives at this key level, so if you end up getting the debuff, you absolutely have to use something here. Keep in mind that for one-shot mechanics like this, we do still have Elusive Mist through Soothing Mist, which is a 6% DR on yourself and your target, so I try to use that on the Abyssal Blast target as I can, both for the orb damage as well as the dot damage. And then I meld this here because I did not trust Fort Brew to keep me alive through the Dark Orb. I said good luck, someone else have fun with this one. That also delayed the debuff a little bit, so the orb is not going to be going off at the same time as that one. But then we have another application anyway, so. Normally when I rotate cooldowns, I try to use Diffuse first if it will work, just because it's a shorter cooldown. But here I went with Fort Brew first because I was using Chi-Ji, which means I will get bigger shields because the Chi Cocoons scale off of our HP, and that counts Fort Brew. And then I was also sending Chi-Ji for throughput, so with Fort Brew, normally I would be in more danger, but because I'm pairing it with a healing cooldown, I didn't want to waste Diffuse in that way. With this number of mobs, you can actually do quite a bit of healing with Jade Empowerment, especially if you're sending 2 of them with any of your healing amps. So that's what I did there. Here I'm just using Chi-Ji to heal through the Abyssal Blast on Fiend, and then once the Shadowy Decay starts, I use Life Cocoon on him. That disappears immediately, and then I follow up with Revival. This boss is another example where it has a mechanic that you are going to ramp every single time in order to meet the heal check, and that is the Shadowy Decay. The Dark Orb does quite a bit of damage, but it's a one and done, so if you live the hit, then you live. But then there's the Shadowy Decay, which is more of this ramping tantrum type of damage, and your healing amps are really important for this. I tend to always start out with Chi-Ji. I try not to use the defensive if I can help it, because at a certain point in this fight, I believe it's the 3rd or 4th Dark Orb, there is an overlap with the orb immediately into a decay, and you want to make sure you have Diffuse for that. If the little mini guys are still alive, you can use Jade Empowerment to heal up from the Dark Orb, but most groups kill them pretty quickly because they do require stops. Here I'm using my Shaylin's Gift to trigger my Fear. I'm also sending my own Fort Brew and my Lumathars and my Cocoon on our Hunter, and then kind of just spot healing everybody else. Here I am using my Aspect of Harmony to ramp on everybody before the Dark Orb goes out because this is a really small window on this overlap. I do press my diffuse a little bit early, so I end up dying for it because it runs out towards the end of the mechanic. But that is the overlap that you are going to make sure that you have diffuse for every single time and just try to use it as late as possible. Here I set my intellect pot because the only cooldown that I have here is Life Cocoon, and I will have Lumithars in 6 seconds, but I don't use it. I use a small Shaylan's Gift into a Lightning, but this is also paired with Rally into AMZ, so would that normally carry that mechanic? No, but in this case it ended up working out. And then for the next one I have quite a few tools. I've got Life Cocoon, Revival, Chi-Ji, and my Lumithars, as well as my own Fort Brew. For this one, because of his spell queuing, I also have little ads to hit during the decay. I do send Chi-Ji anyway, but you do also have access to Jade Empowerment in this situation if you have all of your amps active. For some reason here, we get a Dark Orb into another Dark Orb. I remember this happening a little bit in Season 1, but we never really figured out what caused it, and I still don't, but it's a lot easier to deal with than the Shadowy Decay, so I will take it. For the Architect, the hardest Tormenting Eruption is the first one, mostly because you don't have a ton of time to ramp and you may not have defensives depending on how your Anubikaj kill went. So I usually open with Chi-Ji if I can, otherwise I just tell people that this one I'm pretty light on and they can send defensives, or they can hold their health pot, or just be aware that they may be dropping low on the first set. Once the melee get positioned and once you start having ads to hit, as well as some time to ramp up with your Enveloping Mist and whatnot, then it becomes a lot more comfy. For Rationale, the things I'm looking out for are mostly the Erosive Spray, as well as the person targeted by the kind of sweeping poison wave. I always like to tell people to be careful about picking up bombs during the Erosive Spray as well, because it's actually quite a bit of damage when you're holding it. You see that other debuff. And if you haven't caught on by now, you guessed it, you are ramping every mechanic for this. Both the Expel Webs in the second phase, as well as the Erosive Spray in every phase, is something worth using your Enveloping Mist ramp for. You don't have to ramp on everybody in the second phase for the Expel Webs, it's mainly just the 2 people that it's targeting because it tends to hit them a lot harder. And you're mostly just trying to keep them topped before the next Erosive Spray. If you are doing this pack during the boss intermission, make sure that your tank is the first to land for the patrol so he can pick that up. And also make sure that you are not going to land in a frontal because the mobs phase in and their mechanics are invisible until you're on the ground. I risked it a little bit here, but I would definitely recommend landing further away from the pack than I did just in case that's where the frontal's facing and you can't see it.
Five,
In this second phase, if you are coming from a strands into a spray, I would recommend using your Thunder Focus Tea to trigger your Aspect of Harmony drain for the amp so you can prep for the spray, but I wouldn't necessarily use Chi, for example, on the strands. It is much better served on the spray. Here I pre-ramped a little bit with the Aspect of Harmony dot just to apply it, and then on the first take of damage I am using 2 Tiger Palms actually for Harmonic Surge and then getting everyone all the way back up top with the Blackout Kick stacks. Normally you wouldn't do that with the Chi rotation, but because of Harmonic Surge that is something that we can do, so it's a little bit more forgiving on the rotation. Here I ramped a bit and then I just went ahead and used my Jade Empowerment because I had bounced back for myself, we had AMZ, and then I used Cocoon on our lowest target person. And then I'm just kind of spot healing here for the rest of the debuff duration. Here again we have Fort Brew into Chi for the slightly larger shields, and then I am ramping. And this was a much more standard Chi rotation with Blackout Kick being the first global inside of that cooldown into your Tiger Palms, Blackout Kick, and then just kind of goes wherever from there based on what the group needs. For this one I went ahead and used Fort Brew and my Revival. Normally I pair Diffuse and Revival, but I do have Bounce Back as well. It just took a second for it to trigger. And on this one we actually lose Fiend. I believe with the Spinneret strands, if you're in a Poison Puddle, when your strand lands you take extra damage. I'm not gonna lie, I have not DPS this place very much and healers don't get it, so I don't know exactly how that mechanic works, but it was something to that effect. I sent my Lumithars here because I was a little thrown off by the death, so I didn't pre-ramp, but with Lumithars and with GG, I was able to get an appropriate amount of Enveloping Mist out, and we are done.